Hi guys, I am very excited to present you the game between the man who just has been dominating chess for the last 10 years, Magnus Carlsen, and the man of the moment. He just won the FIDE Candidates tournament in Toronto, Canada. It is Gukesh, 17 years old superstar from India. And later this year, he is going to play against Ding Liren in a World Championship match. But now, it is this man who is in super form, won the tournament of his life, 17 years old, and he's playing against Magnus Carlsen. He is almost twice his age, 33 years old, and it's the game we all want to see. It is Gukesh playing with the white pieces. The game is taking place in Warsaw, Poland. The Superbet Rapid event. It's part of the Grand Chess Tour series of top tournaments with a lot of elite players, and Magnus is one of them, and he's taking on the new generation. But here we go. You all want to see what is happening between the ex-world champion and probably the future one. Well, just one favor, please hit the subscribe button. Thanks for doing so. And I will show you what happens in this game. It's Gukesh who opens with 1 e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, the Italian opening, and we get to see the so-called two knights variation. White is attacking the pawn on f7, and in some separate videos I covered the very spectacular move bishop c5, the Drexler variation. If you're looking for some adventures, you can check out my videos on this line. However, the main move is the move d5 here for black to interfere on this diagonal to hit the bishop. Of course, white is going to take the pawn. And here there are a number of options. If you do take on d5, you get this fried liver attack, which has a very dubious reputation for black. I would not recommend the line. The main move is to go away with a knight to a5 and tickle the bishop. But one very cool sideline, it is the move b5, which is the so-called Ulvestad variation. That is in fact a line I have been studying quite a lot myself recently. I even recorded a 60-minute video course for ChessBase on this very special sideline. And the idea is that you're attacking the bishop. If you do take the pawn, you're able to take with the queen on d5, attacking the bishop, attacking the pawn on g2. Black is all right here. So let's go back. By far the best move for white here is the strange looking move bishop f1. Why do you go back with the bishop? Well, you want to protect this pawn on g2. You're threatening still to take on c6. If you now take with the queen, the bishop is not hanging, and you can actually play knight c3 with tempo, attacking the queen goes away, and then you will take on b5 next. That is favoring white. A much better move is to take with the knight on d5 instead, which also opens up the path for the queen to hit the knight on g5. But rather than moving the knight away, white goes bishop takes b5, and well, if you do take that knight, it's bishop takes c6 and everything is just hanging here. So rather than taking the knight, black has to go here for the move bishop b7, supporting the knight on c6. And now, of course, the threat is to take on g5. And well, there are various options. But the most ambitious move here is to play the move d4, to open up the center. So your bishop defends the knight on g5. Black is going to take the pawn. And here white is castling, intending to get a rook over to e1 very quickly. But black places the bishop on e7 to close the e-file and to attack the knight on g5. Well, this is still pretty well-known theory for both players, I guess. But maybe it's something they had not been expecting for this particular occasion. White can play super aggressively with a move like queen h5 to intending to take the pawn on f7. Black will go g6, and the game is pretty sharp. You should check out my 60-minute video course for that. However, Gukesh played the move knight f3, which is a more solid move, especially for those who are out of book. It does make sense to play it in a safer way. And after castling kingside, here white's idea is to take on c6 to eliminate a knight. You do give up the pair of bishops, but after knight takes d4, you are winning a pawn, you're attacking the bishop goes back to b7. But this is actually absolutely okay for black. You do have the bishop pair, and these bishops are looking excellent. There's pressure on the king side. The other bishop may come to f6 very soon to put pressure against the knight, against the pawn on b2 as well. It's typical type of compensation you'll often see in gambit lines arising from 1 e4, e5. Well, white played here the move knight e2. So he's intending to get a knight over to f3 to guard the king side, but it's rather slow, and for now the bishop on c1 is out of play. Interestingly, this is still part of my analysis in this 60-minute video course, and Magnus plays a move which is worse than the move I do recommend. He played here the move rook e8. It's not a bad move at all, but one little secret I want to share with you. Knight f4, that is the move to play here, to attack the pawn on g2. You cannot play the move g3 because of knight h3 with checkmate. Of course, that would never happen in a game. The trick is here to play knight f3, and it looks as if black has made a mistake here by placing the knight on f4, which is under threat. But the key trick is knight takes g2. It's a full piece sacrifice, and if you do accept it, the queen will come to d7, and there are all sorts of ideas here. To play rook a8, to play c5, the queen will come over to g4, giving a check, attacking the king, as well as the knight on f3, and black is actually winning here already. So that is a remarkable opening idea worth keeping in mind. Well, anyway, let's see what happened in the game, because there followed rook e8, white played the move c3. Still the move knight f4 is very interesting, but Magnus had a different idea. He played here the move c5 to attack the knight on d4. The knight goes to f5. You want to trade off the knight for the bishop. The bishop goes back to f8. All pretty standard. The bishop is guarding the king side pretty well. And after the move knight f3, white is almost completing its development. But how to use that extra pawn? It's not clear at all. And it's black who brings out the queen to f6 to attack the knight. The knight goes back to g3. And there are various interesting moves, including just moving the knight away to open up the diagonal for this bishop. The bishop is just one of the best pieces on the board. You're intending to go rook a8 to attack the queen. I really don't like white's position here at all. But Magnus thought that, okay, maybe bishop g5 is an annoying move to face. So he played here the move h6. And that prevents, of course, white from placing the bishop on g5. White goes for the move queen c2. Now black played very logical move rook a8. So all the pieces are joining the action. And white is looking for a way to get that bishop into the game. But first, rook d1. So that if the knight is going to move, which is what happened in the game, you're opening up the diagonal for the bishop, threatening to take twice on f3, regaining the pawn and damaging the kingside formation. But okay, at least white can now trade off one pair of rooks, which was played in the game, and the threat of taking on f3 is still there. The knight went back to e1. Looks a very sad retreat. The knight at the back rank is not very active at all, but white is just thinking only about getting the bishop into the game, followed by rook d1, trade of more pieces, and then there's no longer any dangerous attack going on. But there's rook e8 first. So black is simply threatening to take the knight with checkmate. The bishop, of course, goes to e3 to close that e-file. But now the knight comes to c4, threatening to take on e3 twice. So that will regain the pawn. But knight f1 is played. So the knight is supporting the bishop. Knight takes e3, knight takes e3. So black is now having two bishops for one pawn. Of course, white has two knights for it. But white is, black is going to play very actively here. And the move c4 was played so that the bishop is on its way to c5. And well, there are various options. You may consider taking that pawn on c4, but now there are all sorts of tactics, including queen g5 with ideas to take on g2 very soon, or first actually eliminate the knight on e1. It looks incredibly dangerous, and I would not recommend to play this at all. What should white do in fact? Well, hard to say. Maybe you can get your rook into the game. I thought that was a very logical move to play. But then the bishop comes to c5, and still there is a lot of pressure. And, well, black seems to be doing fine here. Well, Gukesh had a different idea. He started to play very ambitiously while his rook on a1, it's still a spectator. It needs to join play, but he saw the opportunity to set up some attack against the two pawns. But more importantly, also hitting the rook on e8. But look now, Magnus must have seen this in advance. This key idea which he's going to execute now. He sacrifices the exchange on e3, eliminating white's best minor piece. F takes e3. And now the bishop comes to c5, intending to take on e3. So for instance, if you do take the pawn on c4, you're busted. Bishop takes e3 check, king goes to h1, and now, nice little move here, is bishop a6 to attack the queen. The queen has to move somewhere, but then the queen has to give up the control over the f1 square, which leads to checkmate. So that pawn on c4 is poisoned, and bishop takes e3 is coming next. But what has to be played here? Well, Gukesh thought that he can play in a very clever way by starting here with the move knight f3, which is not a good move. He should just have played here the move queen e8 first, giving a check and defending the pawn. And after king h7, now you can go knight f3. And after bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes, this looks very scary. Bishop takes e3 is a threat, rook e1, defending the pawn, it's still possible. But at least black is having a perpetual, maybe he can play for more, I'm not really sure what's going on. But it's understandable, you don't want to play with such exposed king. But knight f3 was played, and probably he was thinking that there's no need to play here a queen e8 yet. But there is bishop takes e3, and now a big problem for white, where to go with the king. Probably, and that's what I'm thinking, is that Gukesh had been anticipating here to play the move king h1. And if you take now on f3, you can of course not take here because of queen takes f3 and it's going to be checkmate. There's queen e8 check, double attack, and rather than taking the light squared bishop, you do take the bishop on e3. White survives and is an exchange up. But here, it's the key idea. After king h1, you don't take with the bishop, you do take with the queen on f3. Stunning queen sacrifice, threatening checkmate on g2. And if you do take the queen, well, there is bishop takes f3 with an amazing mating construction of the two bishops. Well, therefore, the king has to go to f1. Now, this queen sacrifice is no longer an option. If you do take with the bishop, once again, it's queen e8. That's the idea Gukesh had been thinking about. After king h7, queen takes e3, and white is fine. But to avoid that very nasty check on e8, black played the very clever move, bishop c6, attacking the queen. And where should the queen go? Well, if the queen goes to take the pawn on c4, well, it's bishop takes f3. Now that check on e8 is no longer there, and white's position is falling apart. If you take on f3, queen takes, king e1, queen f2 check, king d1, queen d2 with checkmate. Boom. So queen has to go back to d1 to support that knight on f3. But still, that rook on a1 remains out of play. The queen is very passive. And look at this. The bishop comes in to e4, intending to install itself on d3, which looks very, very strong. Well, white decided here to play it actively with the move queen d7. Still, bishop takes f3 will be met by queen e8. Same idea as we have seen earlier, but you're not going to trade off your light squared bishop. What should be played here? Well, Magnus thought, okay, he wants to eliminate that knight in order to break through with the queen. So he played here the move king h7, threatening to take on f3. But it is a serious mistake. Let me show you what black could have played here. There is this move bishop to d3. Check. And after king to e1, it's still hard to see how to infiltrate with the queen. These bishops are fantastic. But with this move, queen b6, you keep the bishop on e3 defended. The other bishop is nicely anchored on d3. All these squares are taken away by the bishops. And you're almost caught in a mating net. For instance, if you bring the rook, it's bishop f2, king d2, queen e3, checkmate. One very interesting idea, while other options are also not gonna work out. I mean, the idea of playing bishop f2 and queen e3, it's always there. And for instance, if you consider giving a check and then king h7, for instance, something like b4, so that the queen is covering the e3 square. If you play bishop f2 now, the black queen cannot come to e3. But there's another beautiful shot with this idea of bishop to d2, with the idea to open up the path for your queen. And if you do take with a knight, it is queen g1, and you're going to pick up both the knight, because the knight has to come to f1. You will take it, king d2, and now you can take the rook as well, or you can take a pawn first. But anyway, it is completely winning for black, being a piece up. But instead, there followed king h7. Missed opportunity for Magnus. But okay, don't forget, guys, it is a rapid game with only 25 minutes plus 10 seconds increment on the clock. It's not too much to work out all these complications. And sitting in my chair, checking every game with an engine, my life is much easier than theirs. So king e2 is played here to attack the bishop, but also to defend your knight. And the bishop has to move. You have to spend here a valuable tempo with your bishop. Where should the bishop go? Maybe bishop c5 to keep the option open, to play queen b6 and hit the pawn on b2. I think that's an interesting idea, but it's very understandable, very human idea to place your bishop on the safe square, getting the support from a pawn, so they'll never be hanging. But it takes away the tactical power from the queen. Rook e1 played. The rook is joining play again. Finally, on move 32, here to follow the move queen g6, attacking the pawn on g2. Don't play g3 to defend the pawn. There's queen h5, and the knight is no longer supported by the pawn. Everything is hanging here. This looks just very, very dangerous. So king d1 was played in the game, and that's a good move, because now you're opening up the path for the rook to hit the bishop. Queen takes g2 was played. I should point out that if you do give a check first, and after king c1 you want to take on g2, then saying that your bishop is still defended, white can play here queen d2 and force the exchange of queens, as otherwise you will lose more material. And well, if you take on f3, queen takes c2, white is just an exchange up. I mean, queens are still on the board, but things are looking quite good for white. So bishop c2 was not played. Queen takes g2, threatening checkmate on c2, but that is of course spotted by the winner of the candidates tournament. Rook takes e4. Queen takes f3, double attack. You're about to lose the rook if you're not careful. So rook goes back, interfering. Now the bishop comes in. So the bishop joins the attack, takes away more squares from the king. And white cannot do much when the rook is just pinned. b3 played. And now it is queen to f1 check. Of course, you can't go away with the king. You can take the rook. You can also give checkmate, whatever you prefer. That is just mate in one. After rook to e1, solving the check, the queen goes back to f3. And well, king c2, queen f2 doesn't lead anywhere. Your rook is hanging, so you got to go back to d1. So a much more natural way to force a repetition of moves is to block now on e2 with the rook, queen f1, rook e1, queen f3, and the players agree to a draw on move 39. I thought this was a very exciting game between two very ambitious players. And it's great to see such a fighting game by both. Let me know in the comments what do you think of this game. Who is going to win this very exciting tournament? I will promise you to cover more games in the on the channel in the next few days. There are a lot of games to cover, but I've been busy with other work as well. Anyway, thanks for checking out this channel. Do like this video, hit the subscribe button. If you really like this video, small donations on my PayPal account, they're also very much appreciated. So thanks for all the support, and stay tuned for more updates on the Superbet Rapid Tournament in Warsaw, part of the Grand Chess Tour 2024.